the urban legend that locals swear is real and won't talk about at night. In the hollowed hills of northern West Virginia, where the trees grow thick and the valleys swallow sound like secrets never meant to be spoken, there's a stretch of road locals avoid after sundown. Not because it's dangerous in the usual way, no sharp curves, no history of accidents, but because something walks there, something that doesn't belong. The road is called Hollow Creek Lane, winding through the unincorporated township of Gormley Mills, a place so small it doesn't appear on most maps, and so quiet that even birds seem reluctant to sing past twilight. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It was late autumn in the year 1987 when the first official report came in, not to the sheriff's office, but whispered between neighbors over cracked porcelain cups of black coffee. A woman by the name of Thalia Mercer, who lived alone in a weather-worn clapboard house just off Hollow Creek Lane, claimed she saw a figure standing at the edge of her cornfield one evening. She said it wasn't tall, not exactly, but wrong its limbs too long, its head tilted at an angle that made her stomach twist. It didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there, facing her porch, as if waiting for an invitation she had no intention of giving. Thalia was known in Gormley Mills as a practical woman church every Sunday, grew her own vegetables, kept a loaded 38 inches her nightstand since her husband passed in '69. So when she called Sheriff Harlan Voss 3 nights later, voice trembling like a plucked wire, he listened. He arrived with his flashlight cutting through the fog, boots crunching on frost-laced gravel. The house was dark except for a single lamp glowing behind the kitchen curtain. Thalia met him at the door, wrapped in a faded quilt, eyes wide and bloodshot. "It's back," she whispered. "Same spot, in the field." They walked together toward the edge of the property, the beam of the flashlight slicing through the mist. Nothing moved, no footprints in the damp soil, no snapped branches or disturbed earth. Just silence, thick and heavy, like wool pressed against the ears. Then, from somewhere deep in the corn rows, a sound. A low, wet clicking, like stones being rolled in oil. Sheriff Voss aimed the light, the stalks swayed slightly, though there was no wind, and then nothing. The sound stopped. The air stilled. They stood there for nearly 10 minutes, neither speaking, both feeling watched. Sheriff Voss told Thalia to stay indoors, lock the doors, and call him if anything changed. He drove away slowly, scanning the rearview mirror until the house disappeared behind the trees. He filed a report the next morning, possible hallucination due to stress or sleep deprivation, but privately he marked a note in his personal ledger, Hollow Creek, November 3rd, Thalia Mercer. Heard something, felt something, can't explain. That winter was harsh, long stretches of snow, power outages, roads blocked for days. But people in Gormley Mills noticed other things too. Dogs refused to go into backyards after dark. Chickens vanished without signs of struggle. And on still nights, when the moon hung low and yellow, some swore they heard voices calling from the woods, voices that didn't sound human. Children were kept inside after 6, porch lights stayed on all night. Conversations about Hollow Creek Lane ended quickly, often with a shake of the head and a muttered phrase, "Best not talk about it." Then, in early spring of 1988, a teenager named Corwin Bellwether went missing. He was 16, lanky, with a stutter he'd been trying to overcome since childhood. Corwin liked to walk at night, said it helped him think. His mother, Elspeth, would beg him not to go down Hollow Creek Lane, but he always shrugged and said, "Nothing out there but trees and dirt." On the night of March 14th, he left after dinner with a notebook in his pocket, claiming he was writing poetry for school. He never came back. Search parties combed the woods for weeks. Bloodhounds picked up his scent near the creek bed, then lost it abruptly, as if he'd stepped off the face of the earth. A week later, his boots were found placed neatly side by side at the base of an old sycamore, roots tangled like knuckles. No body, no blood, no explanation. The official cause of disappearance? Presumed runaway. But in Gormley Mills, folks knew better. They looked at each other in church pews, eyes shadowed, lips tight. They didn't say much. But they stopped walking that road entirely. Years passed, the story faded mostly. New families moved into the valley, drawn by cheap land and quiet living. They laughed at the old tales. Ghosts, they'd say. Come on. But then, little things started happening. Lights flickering in empty rooms, cold spots in hallways. One woman, Miriam Huxley, claimed she saw a figure in her bathroom mirror one night, a man with sunken eyes and a mouth sewn shut with black thread. She screamed, turned on the light, and it was gone. The next morning, she found a single muddy footprint on the linoleum leading from the bathtub to the door, but the windows were locked. The house had no basement access. In 2005, a documentary crew from Pittsburgh arrived, determined to debunk the myth. They set up cameras along Hollow Creek Lane, motion sensors, audio recorders. For 2 nights, nothing. On the third, at precisely 2:13 in the morning, every device failed simultaneously. The footage showed only static, but audio captured a whisper, faint at first, then clearer. You're not supposed to see. When the lead technician reviewed the files, he noticed something else. In the background, beneath the static, a rhythmic tapping 3 slow knocks, pause, then 2 quick ones, like a code or a warning. He played it for an elderly resident named Otis Grindle, who'd lived in Gormley Mills his entire life. Otis listened once, turned pale, and said, "That's how they used to signal before the mine collapsed in '49. Only the men trapped underground knew that pattern." He refused to speak another word on the subject. By 2012, Hollow Creek Lane was officially closed. The county put up a rusted gate, chained and padlocked, with a sign that read, "Road closed, no trespassing." But kids still dared each other to go. Teens from nearby towns would drive up on weekends, flashlights in hand, laughing nervously as they approached the gate. Most turned back before reaching the tree line. But a few went further. One such group, in October of 2017, included a boy named Jory Linthwaite. He was 17, curious, raised on horror films and internet creepypastas. He didn't believe in ghosts, he believed in adrenaline. That night, he and 3 friends cut the chain with bolt cutters and slipped through. They brought cameras, a Ouija board, even a EVP recorder. They set up camp near the old sycamore where Corwin's boots were found. At first, it was jokes. Flashlight beams dancing through the trees, mocking whispers. Then, around 1 o'clock, the temperature dropped sharply. Breath came out in thick clouds. Their phones died, one by one. Then the recorder picked up a voice, clear, childlike, but distorted. "Don't look behind you." All 4 spun around. Nothing there. But when they turned back, the Ouija board planchette had moved on its own, spelling "Leave now." They packed up fast. As they ran toward the gate, Jory tripped. His friends thought he'd caught his foot on a root, but when they stopped and turned, Jory wasn't getting up. He was staring into the trees, mouth open, eyes wide with terror. "It's watching," he whispered. "It's smiling." They pulled him up, half dragging him the rest of the way. The chain was intact again, no sign it had ever been cut. Jory didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he described a face pale, stretched, with too many teeth. He said it stood between the trees, perfectly still, just smiling. And then, in a voice not his own, he said, "It knows my name." After that, the county welded the gate shut, installed surveillance cameras. Within a week, all 4 cameras malfunctioned. Footage showed nothing but snow, even though the night was clear. And in the corner of one frame, barely visible, a shadow tall, thin, with fingers too long to be real, reached slowly toward the lens. To this day, residents of Gormley Mills won't go near Hollow Creek Lane after dark. If you ask them why, they'll change the subject, or give you a look one that says, "You don't want to know." But if you visit in late autumn, when the leaves turn brittle and the wind carries the scent of damp earth and decay, stand at the edge of that road at dusk. Listen, really listen. You might hear the faintest echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. You might feel the air thicken, your breath shorten, your skin prickle as if unseen eyes have settled on you. And if you're foolish enough to step past the gate, to walk just a few yards down that cracked asphalt path, you may notice something worse. The silence isn't empty. It's waiting. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the moon hides behind clouds and the world holds its breath, you can hear it breathe back. They say it mimics voices, calls out names in familiar tones, your mother's lullaby, your best friend's laugh, just to lure you deeper. But those who've heard it warn, don't answer, don't turn. Don't even think about looking back. Because once it has your attention, it never lets go. There's a reason the elders in Gormley Mills whisper prayers before bedtime, why parents check their children's windows twice, why on certain nights the entire town seems to go dark at once, as if hiding. It's not superstition, it's survival. And if you find yourself near Hollow Creek Lane when the clock strikes midnight, remember this. The stories aren't legends. They're warnings. And the thing in the woods? It remembers every person who didn't listen. Even now, in the hush between heartbeats, in the space where shadows grow longer than they should, something stirs. Not far, not loud, but close enough to hear you breathe. So tell me again, where are you listening from? And more importantly, are you alone? A ghost ship drifted into port with a fresh meal on the stove. It was the winter of 1987 when the fishing trawler Marianne V slipped silently into the harbor of Gloucester, Massachusetts, just before dawn on a brittle February morning. No lights flickered from her deck, no voices called out, no radio signals preceded her arrival. She came like a shadow drifting through fog, her bow nudging gently against Pier 6 as if guided by unseen hands. The first to notice her was Elias Thorne, a weathered dockhand with 40 years of salt in his bones and frost still clinging to the brim of his wool cap. He'd arrived early to check lobster traps, steam rising from his coffee cup curling into the pale gray sky. When he saw the vessel listing slightly, paint peeling like old skin, name barely legible beneath grime, he froze. His breath caught, not from cold, but from instinct. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from and what time is it there? Elias approached slowly, boots crunching over frozen patches of seaweed and ice. The Marianne V had been reported missing 3 weeks prior, last seen off the Georges Bank during a sudden nor'easter that had swallowed 2 other boats whole. The Coast Guard had called off search efforts after 10 days, assuming all hands lost, and yet here she was, intact, afloat, and strangely, undisturbed. No signs of storm damage, no gaping holes in the hull, nothing overturned on deck, just silence. A thick, suffocating silence that pressed against Elias's ears like cotton. He called out once, twice, no answer. Then, steeling himself, he climbed aboard. The moment his boot touched the deck, he felt it a chill that wasn't from the wind. It coiled up from the wood beneath him, sharp and unnatural, as though the ship itself were holding its breath. He moved toward the wheelhouse. The door hung open, swaying slightly with the motion of the tide. Inside, the radio crackled with static, a faint loop of Morse code repeating endlessly 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, SOS, over and over, though the power should have been dead. The logbook lay open on the chart table, the last entry dated February 3rd. Heavy fog. Currents erratic. Can't see land. Something in the water. The handwriting grew jagged, frantic, as if written under duress. Elias flipped back a few pages. Earlier entries spoke of routine hauls, calm seas, even jokes about Captain Rourke's terrible stew. But then, around January 28th, the tone shifted. Crew restless. Emery claims he saw lights beneath the surface, not bioluminescence, too steady, too deep. Emery Vale, third mate, quiet man from inland Maine who rarely spoke unless spoken to. He'd joined the crew only 2 months prior, replacing a man who'd quit mid-season, saying the boat felt haunted. Emery hadn't believed in ghosts, or so the others said. But his journal, found later tucked inside a duffel bag below decks, told a different story. Elias descended the narrow metal stairs into the galley, flashlight beam trembling in his grip, and there, on the cast iron stove, sat a pot, still warm. Steam curled lazily from its cracked lid, carrying the scent of onions, potatoes, and something meaty beef, maybe, or pork. A spoon rested against the rim, crusted with congealing gravy. Beside it, a chipped blue mug held tea, long gone cold, but unmistakably brewed that morning. Or the night before. Or whenever. Time didn't seem to matter here. He backed away, heart hammering. No one could have boarded without being seen. The harbor was monitored, no small craft had entered after midnight, and yet the meal was fresh. As if someone had stepped away just seconds ago. Then he heard it. A soft clink. From the mess hall, like a fork tapping a plate. He turned slowly. The door stood ajar. Darkness pooled beyond it. He pushed it open with the toe of his boot. Tables bolted to the floor. Benches intact. Nothing out of place. Except on the farthest table, set for four plates, each with a portion of stew untouched, forks laid neatly beside them, napkins folded, salt and pepper shakers aligned perfectly. And at the head of the table, a fifth plate, empty. But the chair was pulled out, as if someone had just risen. Elias didn't scream, he didn't run, he simply stood there, flashlight shaking, breath coming in short white puffs, until the sound came, again not a clink this time, but a whisper, faint, guttural, from the sleeping quarters below. He didn't go down, not then. He scrambled back onto the pier, shouting for help, voice raw with panic. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, the pot on the stove was cold, the steam had vanished. But the stew remained, uneaten, perfectly preserved, as if time had paused mid-bite. Captain Silas Rourke, grizzled veteran of 30 seasons at sea, was never found. Nor were his three crewmen, Emery Vale, Harlan Pike, and Jocelyn Crow, the youngest at 23, who'd signed on to save money for nursing school in Portland. Their personal effects were still in their bunks. Photos of family, letters half-written, toothbrushes damp. But no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, just absence. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Divers scoured the hull, sonar scanned the seabed, forensic teams analyzed the stew, confirmed it contained beef, carrots, and barley, cooked within hours of the ship's arrival. No toxins, no hallucinogens, nothing abnormal. Yet every sailor who boarded the Marianne V afterward reported the same thing. The smell of cooking food, even when the stove was cold, the sensation of being watched from empty rooms, whispers in low, guttural tones, always just beyond hearing. One junior officer, Lyle Mander, claimed he saw Emery Vale standing at the railing at 3:17 in the morning, staring into the fog, mouthing words he couldn't understand. When approached, the figure dissolved like mist. The ship was towed to dry dock, declared unsalvageable not due to structural damage, but because morale among crews plummeted. Men refused to work on her. Mechanics reported tools going missing, only to reappear in locked lockers. Electricians swore lights turned on by themselves, dim and flickering, casting long shadows that moved against the walls. By April, the decision was made. The Marianne V would be scuttled, sunk in deep water beyond the continental shelf, where currents would carry her far from shipping lanes. The ceremony was brief. No flags, no speeches, just a single flare shot into the twilight sky as charges detonated along her keel. She sank slowly, bow first, vanishing beneath the waves with an almost ceremonial grace. But here's what they didn't report, what never made the official logs. 3 days later, a Norwegian freighter, the Fjordwind, radioed the Boston Maritime Authority from 50 miles east of Sable Island. They'd spotted wreckage, part of a wooden table, scorched at the edges, floating amid a slick of oil. Attached to it, miraculously preserved in a sealed plastic sleeve, was a page torn from Emery Vale's journal. The handwriting was frantic, ink smudged as if written in haste or fear. "They're not dead. We never left. The ship doesn't sink. It drifts, it waits, it feeds. The stove is always warm, the table is always set, and one day it will come back. With a fresh meal. For us." The page was authenticated, handwriting matched samples from Emery's personnel file, ink consistent with pens issued to crew, but how it survived explosion, fire, and ocean pressure, no scientist could explain. And then, on the evening of December 9th, 2012, a local fisherman named Corwin Haskins reported seeing a vessel matching the Marianne V's description near Jeffrey's Ledge. Fog was heavy that night, visibility near zero. He claimed the ship passed within 20 feet of his boat, lights dark, decks empty. But from her galley window, a yellow glow pulsed like a stove lit below. He tried hailing her, no response. When he turned to grab his radio, she was gone. Vanished into the mist. No wreckage was found, no trace on radar. The Coast Guard dismissed it as a mirage, a trick of the light. But Corwin insisted, said he smelled stew in the air, beef, carrots, barley, and underneath something darker, metallic, like blood. To this day, Gloucester fishermen avoid that stretch of water after sunset, especially in winter, especially when the fog rolls in thick and silent. Some say if you listen closely on still nights, you can hear the Morse code 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots echoing from beneath the waves. Others claim to see a faint glow beneath the surface, drifting with the current like a lantern in the deep. And every year, around February 10th, a single bouquet of wilted wildflowers appears on the railing of Pier 6. No note, no signature. Just flowers brown at the edges, salt stiffened, as if carried across the sea. Left there, some say, by someone who never came home. But perhaps the most unsettling detail, the one that lingers in the mind long after the story ends, is this. When authorities finally cleaned out the galley before scuttling the ship, they found something odd in the cupboard. A can of stew. Store-bought, label faded, best before date, October 12th, 1986. Expired over a year earlier, yet the can was warm to the touch. And when opened, it was full. Steaming. Fresh. As if just heated. No one ate it. It was incinerated along with the rest. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right through the rigging of moored boats, people swear they can smell it. That rich, savory aroma. Onions, potatoes, meat slow-cooked for hours. And they wonder, who was it meant for? And more importantly, is the table still set? The sea keeps its secrets well, but every now and then it returns them to drift into port, unannounced, uninvited, with a fresh meal on the stove and chairs waiting to be filled. So the next time you walk past an empty dock and the wind carries the faint scent of cooking food, ask yourself, was that the neighbor's dinner? Or something else? Something older? Something hungrier? Something that remembers your name and knows when you'll be home? A. 1972 prophecy predicted the end. What happened next is worse. It was the winter of 1972 when a quiet tremor passed through the small town of Black Hollow, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills of eastern Kentucky. Snow had begun to fall early that December, blanketing the crooked rooftops and winding dirt roads in a hush so thick it seemed to muffle even thought itself. The air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, and the few residents who braved the cold moved with slow, deliberate steps, boots crunching over frost-laced gravel, breath curling into ghostly wisps beneath flickering porch lights. At the edge of town, near where the old railroad tracks disappeared into the misty woods, stood a crumbling stone chapel, long abandoned, save for the occasional drifter or curious teenager daring each other to go inside after dark. The chapel had once belonged to a short-lived religious sect known as the Covenant of the Final Dawn, a group that sprang up in the late 1960s, led by a man named Thaddeus Vale, whose sermons spoke not of salvation, but of reckoning. He claimed to have received visions during a near-fatal fever in the summer of 1968, visions of fire falling from the sky, of cities sinking into silence, of a great stillness descending upon the earth like a shroud. His followers, no more than 30 at their peak, built the chapel themselves using river stones and salvaged timber, believing it would serve as a sanctuary when the end came. And according to Vale's final prophecy, inscribed in charcoal on the chapel's inner wall just days before he vanished without a trace, the end would arrive precisely at 3:17 in the morning on December 21st, 1972. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, nearly 5 decades later, the date stirs faint echoes in those who remember. Not because the world ended that night, but because something far more unsettling took place instead. Something that didn't make the newspapers, wasn't captured by radio signals, and left behind only whispers buried beneath layers of denial and disbelief. That evening, a handful of townspeople gathered at the general store, run then by Eldon Mirth, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a habit of speaking in riddles. He kept an old wind-up clock above the counter that never quite matched the time on anyone's wristwatch. By 7 o'clock, the store was unusually full. Minnie Galloway, the postmistress, sat knitting by the pot-bellied stove, her fingers trembling slightly as she looped the yarn. Young Corwin Bellwether, barely 16, leaned against the glass case of penny candy, staring out at the snowfall with a look of eerie calm. And in the back corner, nursing a cup of black coffee, sat Lyriel Crane, a woman who'd arrived in Black Hollow only weeks earlier, claiming to be researching local folklore for a university in Ohio. She wore a long wool coat, the color of dried blood, and her voice, when she spoke, was low and measured, like water moving under ice. They weren't there by accident. Each had heard the rumors. Some said Vale had returned. Others whispered that the ground beneath the chapel had begun to hum at night, vibrating like a plucked wire. A few children reported seeing figures standing among the trees' tall, thin shapes, with no faces, just smooth skin where features should be. And then there was the dream. Dozens of people across the county claimed to have had the same one within days of each other. A vast, silent field under a bruised purple sky where rows of empty chairs stretched endlessly toward a horizon that pulsed like a heartbeat. In the dream, someone or something was waiting for them, but no one could remember who. At 9:42 p.m., the power went out. Not just in Black Hollow. Every home, every streetlight, every radio tower within a 30-mile radius lost electricity simultaneously. The darkness was absolute. No stars pierced the clouds. No moon cast its glow. Even the snow seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside the store, Eldon lit a kerosene lamp, its flame casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. No one spoke. Outside, the wind died. The snow stopped falling mid-air, suspended in glittering crystals that hung motionless between earth and sky. Then, at exactly 2:58 a.m., the clock above the counter began to chime. This was impossible. It was a wind-up clock. It hadn't worked properly in years, and yet it rang 12 times, each tone deep and resonant like a bell tolling underwater. When it finished, Lirael stood slowly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "It's starting," she said. Her voice did not waver. He wasn't wrong, he just misunderstood. No one moved. Corwin's hands clenched around the edge of the candy case. Minnie dropped her knitting, the needles clattering to the floor. Eldon stared at the clock, his face pale, lips parted as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. At 3:17 a.m., the exact moment prophesied, something shifted. It wasn't an explosion, not an earthquake, not even a sound at first. It was a sensation, as if the air itself had grown thinner, as if reality had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. The suspended snowflakes began to fall once more, but slowly, too slowly, like sand through an hourglass turned sideways. Then, from the direction of the chapel, a single note rose a tone so pure and high it made the teeth ache. It lasted only seconds before fading into silence. And then, the lights returned. Electricity surged back through the lines, radios crackled to life with static, the clock above the counter stopped chiming, frozen once more at 10 past 10. Outside, the snow fell normally, birds chirped in the trees. The world seemed unchanged. But it wasn't. Over the next few days, things began to unravel, not all at once, but in quiet, insidious ways. People reported missing hours. Corwin swore he'd walked to the chapel that night, though his boots were dry and untouched by snow. Minnie found letters in her mailbox addressed to people who had died years ago, written in handwriting she recognized but couldn't place. Eldon discovered that his wind-up clock now ran backward, its hands creeping counterclockwise with unnerving precision. And Lirael? She disappeared the next morning, leaving behind only a notebook filled with symbols and dates that stretched far beyond 1972, looping forward into the 21st century and beyond. One page bore a single sentence written in careful script. The end did not come. It arrived earlier, and we simply failed to notice. Black Hollow never recovered its sense of normalcy. Not really. Children born after that winter often spoke of dreams they couldn't explain, of standing in line, barefoot on cold stone, waiting to cross a bridge that led nowhere. Some grew up unable to feel fear. Others could not cry. A few claimed they remembered lives they'd never lived, names they'd never been given, cities that didn't exist on any map. The government eventually sent investigators, men in dark coats, who asked questions but took no notes. They visited the chapel, found nothing but dust and mildew, and declared the site structurally unsound. It was demolished in the spring of 1973. No records remain of what they may have seen or chosen to ignore. Yet, the strangest part isn't what happened that night, it's what continues to happen. Because every December 21st at precisely 3:17 in the morning, clocks across the region stop. Not all of them. just enough. And in homes near the old rail line, people wake suddenly, hearts pounding, convinced someone has just whispered their name, the air grows thick, breathing becomes difficult, and for exactly 13 seconds, the world feels hollow, as if something vital has been removed, replaced by a perfect, echoing absence. Scientists have offered theories: geomagnetic anomalies, infrasound waves, mass hallucination triggered by seasonal affective disorder, but none can explain why dogs refuse to bark during those seconds. Why newborns delivered at that exact time never cry. Why, in rare cases, individuals report seeing a figure standing at the foot of their bed, tall, gaunt, wearing a long coat, holding a notebook open in one hand, writing steadily with the other, and perhaps most chilling of all, why some who experience it claim to recognize the figure, not from photographs, not from stories, but from dreams, from memories that don't belong to them. In the years since, scattered accounts have surfaced: letters tucked into library books, audio recordings uploaded to obscure corners of the internet, diary entries found in attics after the owners have passed. All speak of the same phenomenon, all mention the date. All describe that 13th second, the pause in existence, the breath held too long, the sense that something ancient and patient is watching, waiting, counting. One such account came from a retired schoolteacher in rural Indiana, writing in 2015. I was only 6 when it happened, but I remember the silence. My mother used to say, the world stopped spinning for a moment. I didn't believe her until I felt it again last year. It's getting longer. Not much, maybe half a second more than before, but it's growing. And I hear them now, faintly, like voices through a wall. They're calling names, not ours, names from before. Another, a geologist working in New Mexico, recorded a series of seismic readings taken on December 21st, 2019. His instruments detected no earthquake, no tremor, just a single, isolated pulse of energy emanating from somewhere deep beneath the Appalachian Range. The waveform resembled nothing natural. It looked, he wrote, like a heartbeat, but one that shouldn't exist. And then there's the recording, widely dismissed as a hoax, that surfaced on a now-deleted podcast in 2022. It begins with ambient noise, wind, distant traffic, the rustle of fabric. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., everything cuts out. For 13 seconds, there is only silence. And then, just as abruptly, a voice, soft, genderless, speaking in perfect English with no discernible accent, says, "We are sorry, it must be this way. You were never meant to wake up." The recording ends there. To this day, no one knows who made it or why. But here's what no one wants to admit. The prophecy wasn't wrong. It was precise. The end did come on December 21st, 1972 at 3:17 in the morning. But it wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of reality, at least, the reality we believed we inhabited. What followed wasn't destruction. It was replacement, a subtle, seamless overwrite. Like changing film in a projector while the audience watches, unaware, the image has shifted. Those who felt it, the ones who woke in terror, who sensed the absence, who saw the figure in the coat, they're the ones who almost broke through. And the ones who remember fragments, who carry the weight of knowing something is deeply off, they're not crazy, they're the survivors of a transition no one else acknowledges. And the worst part? It's still happening. Every year, the pause grows. Not enough for most to notice. But for those sensitive to the shift, the ones who've always felt out of step with the world, who dream in colors that don't exist, who hear music when no one is playing, it's becoming harder to ignore. Time doesn't flow the way it used to. Memories blur at the edges. Faces in photographs seem subtly wrong. Loved ones sometimes speak with slight delays, as if echoing from a room just out of reach. And in the deepest hollows of Appalachia, where the trees grow too close together and the fog never quite lifts, locals still avoid the old rail path after midnight. Hunters refuse to camp near the ruins of the stone chapel. And on cold December nights, when the wind howls just right, some swear they can hear faint chanting words in no known language, rising from beneath the earth. They say Thaddeus Vale didn't vanish, he was taken, Not killed, not imprisoned, but promoted, given a role in whatever lies beyond the veil. And the notebook Lyra L left behind? It wasn't a record of the future, it was a ledger, a list of names, of souls who resisted the change, of those who might, one day, need to be corrected. So when you hear your clock tick strangely tonight, when your dog whimpers at nothing, when you wake suddenly, certain someone called your name, but no one's there, ask yourself, did the world survive 1972? Or did it merely continue pretending?